Back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, May 7th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about Governor Kristi Noem from the state of South Dakota as she falls from grace as someone who was previously flagged as one of Donald Trump's major contenders for the vice presidential spot here, somebody who many Republicans were hoping would eventually be chosen as the VP nom, especially as one of the biggest governors out there, known well in the Republican Party to endorse Donald Trump in the immediate aftermath, at which he started ramping up his presidential election campaign. Governor Kristi Noem has been at the forefront of the Veep stakes, largely because she was a major supporter of his not only in this election, but also in past elections. She has maintained herself as a surrogate for the Trump campaign and has been a very dominating presence on the Republican side, advocating for many of the same policies that Donald Trump supported in the White House. Kristi Noem, also very well known from the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, when she was very against any and all restrictions across the state of South Dakota. She kept all of the schools open, did not impose any mask mandates, and despite warnings from many major officials across the country, she decided she was going to do things her way. And with it came a very positive response from the Republican Party. She was immediately popularized as one of the America's governors type of thinking. And she also, prior to Donald Trump losing the 2024 election, and running is what I meant to say again in 2024, she was floated as a potential contender for the 2024 presidential election. And so now most recently, she has seen a number of interviews and scandals really coming in here after she released a book talking about how she killed her dog. Now, I know it might seem quite extreme, and it might be something that is very out of the ordinary for a politician to say. But no, she never apologized for it, and this has been at the forefront of her potential candidacy as Donald Trump's VP nominee. It's gone so far as to when she was questioned about her dog and her story that she wrote about in her book here, she suggested that President Biden's dog should have been killed too. And so she really hasn't been backpedaling from something that very much enraged not only members of the left, but also members of the right. It has been consistent in her interview with CBS and most recently with Fox News, where she snapped at a Fox Business host. Keep in mind, Fox News is the most beneficial, right-wing media there for the Republican Party. And she says that, the interview is ridiculous. She keeps trying to pivot away from this very vulgar thing that she wrote about and said that she did, and in fact admitted that she did here, and it can't just seem to understand why the American public, why interviewers might be wondering why she did what she did. But it isn't lost on the American public that this is not a good look. And it certainly isn't lost on the Donald Trump campaign, as they essentially, based on people who are inside the Trump campaign and very close to the former president, saying that she essentially killed her chances. Now, the Trump campaign has been openly floating the idea of a VP nominee for quite some time now, whether it was Kristi Noem, at a brief period of time it was Nikki Haley, or Representative Elise Stefanik. Kristi Noem often was one of the top contenders here for the VP nominee. It goes so far as to, in her rally of her endorsement for Donald Trump, they threw both of their last names up there through the 2024 banner under it, and it seemed to suggest that maybe there was some heavy consideration here that Donald Trump and Kristi Noem would be chosen. We've made plenty of videos talking about how they've been actively hinting at the idea of her being chosen, and yet she is falling from grace. It's a really bad look here, too, for Kristi Noem, not only for this chance of being chosen as VP, but potentially for any future that she would like in a Republican administration. Kristi Noem might not have only ended her VP chances or even Trump administrative chances, but potentially her chances in the future, should she ever want to run for president. Because this isn't the end of her political career. She was hoping for the VP spot. She hasn't denied that in the slightest. And there also has been heavy conversation from people who are close to her and close to the former president that these conversations have already been had. There has been an extensive amount of research and discussion here about Kristi Noem potentially being VP, and this essentially threw it all up in smoke here. Now with Senator Tim Scott, Governor Doug Burgum rising in the Trump VP race as Kristi Noem quickly fades here, going so far as to sources close to Donald Trump suggesting that he has entirely written her out as a potential VP nominee following the publishing of this book. Now, I can't imagine just exactly how much of an error that this actually was. There's a reason the media gives her, the opportunity to apologize for some of the things that she said in her book, to backtrack some of the things that she said. Because I think to many of us on the outside who don't know her, who aren't her publisher, who aren't her editor, it was a genuine question. How in the world is someone who is under so much scrutiny, an elected official across an entire state, allowing themselves to put this out there? Not going so far as to suggest that it is political suicide. I don't think that that is a fair statement. What I do think is a fair statement, though, is that this absolutely completely removes any chance at higher office. Kristi Noem will probably be stuck as a former governor for an extensive period of time. At most, she could return to the House of Representatives and maybe, in an extreme case, the United States Senate. But this is something that is such an insane error that I don't think any of us really understand exactly how bad this was, especially from a PR perspective. Because this is a very, very easy humanity type of attack that Democrats could weaponize against her should she decide to run for quite literally anything that she has even seen Republicans in the House, in the Senate, outside of office condemn her for these actions, going so far as to snapping now with Fox Business. Everything seems to be falling apart on her end, and all of it seems to be her fault. She was at one point in time this very big favorite, and I genuinely have to wonder, though, what was it that really drew her to this VP spot? I think Kristi Noem, for someone who has media training, who knows how not only to talk to the press, but to talk to constituents, I think there are certainly some attributes of her that make her a commendable VP nominee on the side of Donald Trump. On the other hand, though, there are other options out there that might not fill that niche that the Trump campaign is looking in cases of they're trying to choose a woman, they're trying to choose a minority. But you think about people like Doug Burgum who are now moving up on the spot here. The question, though, I think that I come back to when I think about Kristi Noem as the VP nom, I genuinely have to ask, what does she add electorally? While she may be a nice balance just in terms of perception, that she's a new governor or someone who's a more, popularized name in the GOP, but not Donald Trump, not from the Trump administration, elected in 2018, a lot of different things here. I think for me, I wonder what value add did she have to this election? Because South Dakota was already going to go red. And I genuinely can't give you an answer. And so in a way, I think with Kristi Noem out of the running of being this VP nominee, unless something dramatically changes between now and the time that Donald Trump announces, I look at this and I say, whoever Donald Trump is going to choose probably should be adding electorally and not just this standalone person who is largely seen as an NPC, right? Somebody who is just there for the purpose of being VP, but doesn't add to a ticket. Somebody like Nikki Haley adds to a ticket. Somebody like Tim Scott adds to a ticket. While Kristi Noem might have made history as the second woman chosen for VP in the 21st century on the Republican side, not to directly draw comparisons, but I could have seen a Sarah Palin type of moment happen had Kristi Noem been chosen. And I'm not saying that, on the basis of the fact that I think Kristi Noem, really can't fend for herself. I think Sarah Palin, in retrospect, was probably one of the poor political decisions that was done by the John McCain campaign that was largely a rushed one. It was an effort to shake up the race, but it was things like this that came out during the campaign. Not necessarily, shooting her dog, but things related to being unable to answer simple questions about the government, being unable to handle themselves in front of the press. That's what is now happening with Kristi Noem. And I think you also start to see it too. She is also exhibiting very similar reactions to what we saw with Governor Ron DeSantis. All the hype was around her when people saw her name on paper, but when they actually started digging and they actually started to get to know her more and more and more, she became less and less electable and less palatable. Very similar to Governor DeSantis, very similar to Governor Palin here. I think there are some significant differences between them, but fundamentally, the way she has presented herself in the past and the way she is presenting herself now, I would not want to be on her comms team right now, given all of this backlash, because there genuinely is no way to handle it but to either say I lied in my book, which obviously would at this point be way too late in the game, or apologizing for it and recognizing that the vulgar language that was used was incorrect, recognizing that the way at which it was approached to the press, the backlash that they put on. Kristi Noem has been taking a page out of the Trump playbook and trying to attack the media rather than to engage with it, in a respectable manner. And while that may work for Donald Trump, evidently it does not for Kristi Noem. And it makes her less and less likely here for Donald Trump to choose her. But back to that point here, where we talked about what value add she had to the ticket. Again, maybe this was a positive thing. Because Kristi Noem very clearly does not know how to handle a PR disaster, does not know how to handle this situation in front of the press. And so maybe Donald Trump will choose somebody who has, a better perception on how to handle a presidential race, a better take on what things like this, should be done versus not done, what should be said versus not said. I mean, she continues to hammer in this point saying that she wants the truth to be out there, but just can't seem to handle that the pushback on said truth exists in a very, very high fashion. I mean, you saw it too when all of this seemed to be coming out and breaking news. The Democratic Party started posting images of their governors with dogs, President Biden with dogs, Vice President Harris with dogs. The Democrats knew what they were doing because they knew that no matter what side of the aisle you were on, you could not defend this. Republicans, too, that don't like Kristi Noem, and some of that which are not aligned with the former president's campaign, have also been posting about it, also been making this a thing. Now, I don't think the average American has heard about this. It's not a big enough story because she isn't the VP nominee yet, but I think the Trump campaign and, even part of other people that are in consideration, like Tim Scott, Doug Burgum, Marco Rubio, are happy that this story broke because it absolutely tanked her chances at being VP. I do think, too, should Donald Trump decide to make her VP anyways, I think this could be some serious baggage on the campaign trail because she has doubled down on it to a point where now the coverage has gone to Politico, CBS News, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Fox News, Newsweek, The Hill, ABC News. It goes on and on. NBC News. I mean, you are talking about so many different stories covering this. Now covering how her odds have decreased, how Trump is considering other people. I mean, all of this is a very, very bad look for the Republican Party and would be especially bad in the event that she is chosen as the VP nominee. And so steps moving forward, I think if we were to look at this and look at it from the Trump angle, I think based on who is now moving up in the rankings, there needs to be a serious reevaluation of what's going to happen on the VP spot. All of these Veep stakes that we are talking about here, many of the people that are now supposedly moving up in the ranking, moving up in consideration, I genuinely have to, introspect on this or, look at this and say, these still are not the most stellar candidates. I don't think many people realize this, but the Republican Party really doesn't have an extensive bench for a strong set of VP contenders. The strongest person they had in this entire presidential election undoubtedly was Nikki Haley. Regardless if you liked her or not, regardless if you thought that she was a good campaigner or not on the Republican side, she was a very powerful voice for independent voters who were deciding between Trump and Biden and leaned towards Biden, but were willing to take another option. At the end of the day, Nikki Haley outperformed Donald Trump in nearly every single poll, some points even exceptionally large advantages. Some polls showing her up to a 17-point lead nationally with a minimum lead of 2, 3, 4, 5 points. Significantly better than where Donald Trump is, significantly better than where Governor DeSantis was. I mean, so many different things here that I looked at and said, Nikki Haley should be the VP nominee. If you're looking at this from strictly the lens of electability, strictly the lens of who's going to bring the most to the ticket, that is Nikki Haley. And yet it simply doesn't happen. And I think we are going to really find the Trump campaign struggling to come up with someone who is as strong as Nikki Haley. I think Kristi Noem to them might have been that opportunity, but even then, genuinely, I don't know if that's going to be true. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Kristi Noem just simply isn't in the running. Her falling from grace, I think, also just really doesn't a number at what the Trump campaign is willing to deal with. I think it goes to show that despite Donald Trump's many scandals, Donald Trump's many, pitfalls when it comes down to what he does, they are looking to be risk averse. They are looking to be scandal free with whoever they decide to make VP. And I think that's smart. It's a very unlike Trump strategy to take this into consideration when the team itself won't stop him from creating new scandals, new controversies, new things for the Democratic Party to attack him on. But they are very careful about who they involve. And I think in this instance, Kristi Noem very much is one of those people where the Trump campaign is just looking at it and saying, It's too much risk and not enough reward. They're looking at her past election performances, like the governor's race in 2018, when she won by a margin of just 3.4%. They're looking at the 2022 election results, where Kristi Noem won by 26.8%, but still, you look at the 2020 presidential, and Donald Trump did very, very similar. This is supposed to be a better year for Republicans, and yet Kristi Noem didn't underperform in the way she did in 2018. Granted, Democrats ran a stellar candidate here, but she doesn't have the most amazing election past. Her first House election in 2010, she won by a margin here of 2.2%. In 2012, it turned into 14.9%, underperforming where Mitt Romney was. In 2014, though, it expanded. In 2016, it maintained itself. In 2018, a Republican won it there. But the point is, the electoral history of Kristi Noem isn't as strong as we might think. And maybe at the end of this all, despite Kristi Noem being someone that was at the top of the Veek stakes at one point, it might be better ultimately for the Trump campaign now that she is no longer in consideration. But genuinely speaking, only time will tell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist from my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.